daughter-in-law's father looked around my small house, glanced at my rusty old pickup truck parked in the driveway, and let out a quiet laugh. "Raymond," he said with a smirk, "you're retired now. Maybe it's time to find a side job. You can't expect to live comfortably forever." The room fell silent. I simply smiled, poured another cup of coffee, and looked out at my vegetable garden. He thought my silence meant embarrassment. In reality, it meant experience. At 64 years old, I had learned that arguing with people who judge by appearances is a waste of energy. The truth has a way of revealing itself when the time is right. After my wife, Linda, passed away 3 years earlier, I chose a peaceful life. Every morning I watered the tomatoes she loved to grow. I repaired broken chairs instead of buying new ones. I drove the same pickup truck I had owned for nearly 20 years. Neighbors assumed I was struggling. Some even offered to help. I always thanked them politely and carried on, because the simple life I lived was not forced upon me. It was a choice Linda and I had made decades ago. We believed that every dollar spent trying to impress strangers was a dollar stolen from our future. While coworkers financed luxury SUVs, we invested quietly. While friends bought vacation homes they could barely afford, we purchased rental properties that generated steady income. While others chased status, we chased security. No one noticed, and that was exactly how we liked it. Our son Nathan grew up watching us save, plan, and think carefully before every financial decision. He never complained about hand-me-down bicycles or family road trips instead of expensive vacations. He understood that discipline today creates freedom tomorrow. When Nathan met the woman he would eventually marry, I was genuinely happy for him. She seemed polite, intelligent, and ambitious. At the wedding I hugged her and whispered, "Your family now?" I meant every word. For the first few weeks after the marriage, everything seemed normal. Then the questions began. "So, Raymond, is this house completely paid off? Do you have retirement savings? Have you written a will?" The questions were wrapped in friendly smiles, but something about them felt rehearsed. I answered vaguely, "Yes, I planned ahead." Then I changed the subject. Soon her father started joining family dinners. He rarely asked about my health or my hobbies. Instead, he looked around the room as though he were evaluating an investment opportunity. One evening he stared at my aging furniture and quietly told Nathan, "Your father probably needs financial guidance." Nathan laughed awkwardly. I stayed silent. Weeks turned into months. The comments became more direct. "Raymond, have you thought about transferring ownership of your home? You don't want the government taking your assets. It would be easier if someone younger managed everything." Every suggestion sounded reasonable on the surface, but after 40 years negotiating business contracts and property deals, I knew the difference between genuine advice and carefully disguised self-interest. Nathan seemed uncomfortable whenever these conversations happened. Sometimes he defended me, sometimes he stayed quiet. I could see the conflict in his eyes. He loved his wife, he loved his father, and he didn't know whom to disappoint. One afternoon, he came by alone. "Dad," he asked carefully, "are you doing okay financially?" I smiled. "I'm doing just fine, son." He nodded, but I could tell he wasn't convinced. That evening I walked into my study and opened the old wooden cabinet Linda always called our future box. Inside were decades of records, investment statements, property deeds, business documents, tax records, everything carefully organized. Linda used to joke that if either of us disappeared tomorrow, the other could rebuild our entire financial history in a single afternoon. Looking at those folders reminded me of every sacrifice we had made together. The birthdays where we chose homemade dinners over expensive restaurants. The vacations we skipped so we could buy another rental unit. The nights we stayed awake discussing interest rates and long-term plans. Those sacrifices had become freedom, and freedom cannot be measured by appearances. A month later, Nathan called and invited me to dinner. When I arrived, his wife's father greeted me with unusual enthusiasm. A lawyer was already sitting at the table. Several folders waited beside neatly placed pens. "We've prepared something to make life easier for you," he explained. I opened the document slowly. The language sounded helpful, but hidden inside were clauses that would gradually transfer significant authority over my assets to others. I closed the folder. No anger, no raised voice, just quiet certainty. Then I reached into my leather briefcase and placed my own folder on the table. Inside were certified copies of ownership records for 8 fully paid residential properties, multiple investment portfolios, dividend accounts, treasury bonds, and a trust Linda and I had established many years before. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. Nathan leaned forward in complete shock. His wife's father stopped smiling. I calmly looked around the room. "You assumed my old truck meant I was poor," no one replied. "You assumed patched jeans meant I lacked education." Still silence. "You assumed gardening was all I did." The lawyer quietly flipped through the documents again. Finally, I continued. "Linda and I planned every chapter of our lives before most people our age started thinking about retirement." I pointed gently toward the unsigned paperwork. "I appreciate concern, but concern should never require me to surrender control over what my wife and I spent 40 years building." The confidence that had filled the room disappeared. Nathan's wife looked at her father. Her father looked at the lawyer. The lawyer quietly packed his papers. Nathan finally broke the silence. "Dad, why didn't you ever tell me?" I smiled. "Because real security doesn't need an audience." That evening ended without arguments, without insults, without revenge speeches, just truth. Over the following weeks, something interesting happened. The financial advice stopped. The constant questions disappeared. Family dinners became ordinary conversations again. Months later, Nathan visited my house by himself. He apologized. "I should have trusted your judgment." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "My father once told me that character is revealed by how people treat someone they believe has nothing left to give." Nathan never forgot those words. Neither did I. Today I still drive the same pickup truck. I still grow tomatoes in Linda's garden. I still repair broken tools instead of replacing them. People continue to underestimate me, and that's perfectly fine. Because wealth isn't the number printed on a bank statement. It's waking up without debt. It's knowing your future is secure. It's having enough wisdom to stay calm while others rush toward greed. Sometimes justice isn't found in a courtroom. Sometimes it arrives quietly across a dining table, carried inside a folder that tells the truth more powerfully than any argument ever could. The people who laughed at my lifestyle learned a lesson that night. A modest home can hide extraordinary success. An old truck can belong to a millionaire. And the quietest person in the room may have planned 10 steps ahead of everyone else. When I returned home that evening, I parked my truck, watered Linda's flowers, watched the sunset, and smiled. Not because I had embarrassed anyone, but because patience had once again defeated arrogance. And in the silence of that garden, I thanked Linda for teaching me that true wealth is never about impressing people. It is about living life on your own terms, with dignity, preparation, wisdom, and peace. ये एक्सपेंडेड वर्जन आसानी से 20 to 30 मिनट की नरेटेड यूट्यूब वीडियो बन सकती है, खासकर अगर आप इसमें सिनेमैटिक पॉजेस, बैकग्राउंड म्यूजिक और रेलेवेंट विजुअल्स शामिल करें।